Hi, and welcome to another season, or if you're in the UK, another series of It's a Rare Thing. This is the first episode for Series 2, Season 2, and I'm delighted to be joined by Brad. Brad, hi, welcome.
Yeah. Hi, Jez. Thanks for having me.
You're right, buddy. So we're going through a bit of a heat wave at the moment. How are you feeling?
Yeah, it is. It's really warm. But yeah, I think it's a little bit cooler in Wales compared to England. So yeah, I'm just thankful that I'm not in the blistering heat in England at the moment.
No, exactly. No, whereabouts in Wales are you?
So in South Wales,
Oh, nice.
and
Okay.
yeah, so but not towards Cardiff or anything. So yeah, more in West Wales at the moment. So again, it's probably a little bit cooler by the coast and things, which is nice. Yeah.
I can only tell you as I sit in my sweatbox how envious I am right now. Look, yeah, so thanks for joining us for a rare thing. You know what this is about. This is a podcast series about those who are living with, who have lived with, or have been diagnosed with syringomyelia, Chiari malformation, or any of the associated conditions. So, and again, I would encourage people because I'm not a doctor, and I'm sure you aren't either, Brad, unless I misread your notes.
No.
We're not about giving medical advice or opinion. It's just about discussing people's stories. And I think this season, this series, I need to make my mind up which it is. It's about talking to people who have had a remarkable journey and quite a surprising journey. And Brad, if you don't mind me saying, excuse me, you're one of those. So, how did it all start out for you? What's your story? How did it all start out?
So it started out when I was about two. Well, prior to that, I had some problems as in when I was in utero, and unfortunately had an intraventricular bleed when I was born, and a cardiac arrest as well. So my start wasn't particularly great.
No, wow.
Yeah, so I spent some time in neonatal intensive care, and then went home and all the rest of it. And it wasn't really until about the age of two, that my mum picked up that my development wasn't quite as expected, and some issues with my bowel and my bladder. So that's what sort of prompted her to go and see GP and sort of try and find out what was going on, really.
Sure.
That's how it sort of started out. Yeah.
Okay, so obviously you remember those days very well.
Yeah, it's weird, isn't it? How yeah,
I
I
know,
think
2 years
you
of
experience
age.
these
Wow.
things.
Okay, so what were the doctors saying then? Your mum went to the
Um,
doctors. What were there a series of doctors? I mean, I don't want to dwell too much into that time period, but I guess there was a series of appointments and specialists, and they came to the conclusion of what and over what time frame.
yeah, so to start with, because it was actually bowel and bladder problems that
Sure.
were noted to be not quite right, and to start with, it was the usual. He just needs to work on his diet and those sorts of things, and I think it was a fairly back and forth
Okay.
to the doctors, and
So
eventually.
there's just for the listeners and myself, this wasn't just. I mean, I've got two kids, right? And potty training them is a challenge at the best of times. It wasn't just about potty training or you were late to the potty. It was about perhaps irregular uh, stool movement and urinary functions, etc. Was it?
Yeah, that's spot on. Yeah,
Gotcha.
severe constipation, and yeah, incontinence with my bladder, and so yeah, things became quite serious, which
Mm,
they then thank goodness for my mom being such a amazing advocate for me, and just kept pushing, and eventually, in one of the children's hospitals, they examined me and things and agreed that things weren't quite normal, and that's when they agreed to do a spinal MRI. Yeah.
wow. Okay. Um, so. The spinal MRI. This the again, we're still talking about the ages between 2 and 3, yeah.
Yeah, that sort of age. Yeah,
And the
yeah.
spinal MRI showed what?
So the spinal MRI confirmed that there was a syrinx in my spinal cord. For those who are interested, between T9 and T11,
Hmm.
um, and also that there was a some cord tethering and fatty phylum as well towards the base of my spinal cord. So that sort of, I guess, provided the diagnosis of syringomyelia, which yeah, probably don't think anyone was expecting.
No.
But yeah, obviously it's one of those things of gives the sort of clarity of why things potentially were why they were with me, but obviously not particularly news that a parent probably expects to hear.
No,
Um,
well, I mean, it's such a rare condition. That's why the podcast is called It's a Rare Thing. That, the first thing, I don't know. Sorry, I don't want to guess your age unless you want to give it, but I'm guessing Google wasn't around when you were two, no?
No, so I'm 30.
Okay,
So
all right.
we're talking like the late 90s, early
Okay, yeah.
2000s.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so probably, yeah, the internet was around, but probably not a great research tool. If it is indeed a great research tool now, I'm never quite so sure when it comes to Dr. Google. But that must have been really worrying. It's really worrying for any parent with any condition, where children are often bring out, I think, parents' worst fears and nightmares in terms of what can go wrong with a child sometimes. And there they are faced with a condition that they can probably barely pronounce, let alone understand what the implications are, which
Yeah,
must have been,
exactly.
yeah, sorry, which must have been very, very alarming for them.
Yeah. I think it's that trying to think of the phrase that somebody said to me a long time ago, but it's that thing of, I guess, a sense of grieving the child that you thought you were going to have,
Mm, mm.
and that radical shift to how life potentially is going to be different for you as a family unit, and what the future holds really. So obviously that's not my experience, but it's yeah, I think it's an important one in this, when we're talking about syringomyelia, it was around not just the impact on the individual, but also on the
Yeah.
family and friends and extended family. It has a ripple effect, and I think when you're living with something quite rare, I do think it adds that level of difficulty to cope and accept and manage that as well.
I think you're absolutely right. That's a really good analogy. I think a really good description of what a parent might feel with in terms of that sort of grieving of the potential, because they're not grieving really for themselves or their own circumstances. It's the potential, the hopes, the ambitions, the love you have for your child that
Mm.
you want them to do very well in life, right? That's why you brought them into the world, and conditions tend to, not always, but tend to slightly diminish those prospects, certainly when it comes to disability. So, what happened after the diagnosis? Well, actually, no, before I ask you that, the syrinx, give me, I'm trying to build a picture here of how large that syrinx is for a 2-year-old. But with your description with the tethering, that sounds quite large.
Yeah, I think again, I've managed to get hold of all of my records from the children's hospitals that I've was under, and there's the I guess the narrative sort of changed with time, and early on it's certainly written as to be sort of significant finding.
Sure.
And so I think in these early days, it was seen as something where the syrinx was fairly significant, and the tethering would likely have implications for me as well. So yeah, at that time it was just very much of, I guess we weren't expecting a great outcome sort of from a longevity perspective. Yeah.
No. Okay. Well, I'm going to say that there is something shocking and remarkable about your story. But before we get to that, I want to just sort of venture forward a few years. You growing up, you're now at school, you're four, five, six, seven. How were things progressing with your health, with your condition, with the syringomyelia?
Um, so the as I say, for me, it impacted my urinary function and my bowel function more than anything. So I continued to live with incontinence, being in incontinence pads for a large part of my school years,
Wow.
needing support to sort of clean up and stuff in the toilets. From I remember the sort of dinner lady staff having to do that in school for me. So
Were
so
your
that
peers, were your friends, were school children aware of this?
I think they knew that something wasn't quite typical, but
Right. Okay.
that's sort of all they really knew.
Fine. That's more than enough for kids of that age because kids can be very cruel and very, 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 very cruel. So you limited the knowledge probably by instinct, I would imagine.
Yeah, exactly. And also, I remember having passes in school to be able to, so I could get out of class and go to pee. Those systems like having a coloured card and stuff like that.
Hmm.
It's one of those where you've got then a system to be able to access potentially what you need, but you also stand out.
Yeah.
And I think for me, I found that challenging in trying to fit in and be as normal, if you like, as I could, but also making sure that I could get access to a toilet if I needed it, and those sorts of things. And kids do pick up on it. Why is Brad using the disabled toilet? Why is he able to get out of class and go, but I'm not? Why is he not having to take
Yeah.
part in
Yeah.
in
The
sports
why.
and that sort of
Yeah.
stuff? Yeah.
Yeah. The why. And I would imagine lessons like PE were quite a trial at times. Well,
Well,
did you have any other symptoms around sensation, muscular difficulties, or weaknesses, or stability, or mobility? Any issues around that at all?
yeah, there were a couple more things. So, I used to drag my right leg, which I wasn't really aware of, to be honest. But my mum picked up on it quite a lot that I was sort of dragging my right foot, slightly not having a quite normal gait or walk,
Mm,
and I had some issues with my reflexes, being reduced as well. But I wouldn't say that particularly impacted me very much. I just wasn't aware of it as much as people who could probably see it. But I did
were
suffer.
you able to run?
Yeah, I could run. And yeah, my mobility, I would say probably wasn't that impacted,
No,
but
you just had an interesting gait.
yeah, but I did have quite profound headaches, which to the point where I was banging my head against a wall, because it was that severe, vomiting,
Wow.
really quite severe. And again, there were lots of conversations about is this a typical migraine? Is this a hemiplegic headache? Or, went through all those motions trying to classify what type of headache this was. But I mean, that wasn't really important to me. It was more around trying to get that under control because they were quite debilitating. They were quite frequent, and yeah, I got very vivid memories of those headaches and the pain that I was in with them.
And during these school years, from the age of two to where we're talking to now, were your parents offered, were you offered treatment or any surgical intervention to drain
So
or try and alleviate what the syrinx was doing, or the tethering? Was surgery ever mentioned? How were the conditions being managed, or was it a watch and wait?
so it was mainly conservative watch and wait, but surgery was discussed. But the sort of headline that was given was that there was about a 50-50% chance of paralysis.
That's right.
Because my symptoms, and again, it's obviously all relative, isn't it? But I think because it was seen as fairly mild symptoms in terms of, I was able to be mobile and those sorts of things, that actually that they felt that the risk of intervention was probably not worth it. And so they took a wait and watch approach with me, just serial scans and neurological follow-up and review, and those sorts of things. So the only sort of significant element I was living with is that I did have to have a stoma fitted for my bowel between the ages of 9 and 16, because my bowel was that severely impacted that I ended up being hospitalized for impaction and all the rest of it. So living with the stoma was sort of the biggest element for me. But other than that, I would say my symptoms I feel were probably fairly mild. So it was a wait and watch approach.
Okay. How did you feel during those years? So I'm gonna just you said between the ages of 9 and 16 you had a stoma. How was it affecting you in terms of your mental health? Were you a happy child? Were you an outgoing child, or did it weigh heavy? Was it something that you were conscious of? Did you avoid people, social situations, or were you, how did that play out?
I think in those earlier days, sort of 9, 10, 11. I think for me it didn't feel like that much of a big deal. I didn't particularly like going and having to have, be anaesthetized for MRI scans and stuff like that. I didn't particularly like that element, but day to day in school and things, I don't recall it being that much of an issue. I think as I got towards teenage years, there was a real change then in terms of, you become aware of your body image and
Yeah,
relationships and those sorts of things. And I guess I started to hate my body more as time went on in those years, because I was really aware that actually I've got this stoma, as a result of this, and I wish I didn't have it, and all those sorts of things. So it definitely became more of a problem for me into my teenage years in high school and
mm,
things. Yeah.
mm. And it's a really difficult age to cope with something like that, to live with something like this, because I would imagine, it's support groups, right? I mean, Anne Conroy Trust, amazing. They're a great bunch, a really
Mm.
dedicated bunch of volunteers who offer a fantastic support helpline, regular meetings around the country, and fund really essential research. But I'm not sure. I mean, hopefully I'm wrong, but I'm not sure if teenagers would gravitate to it necessarily. And back then, were you offered any support groups, any counselling, or anything other than just medical checkups?
Yeah, so I was actually I was paired up, if you like, a bit of a peer scheme. They put me in touch with another family who had a little boy who was also living with syringomyelia, and I can remember that we when I went to the hospital, he lived in the local area, so it was quite easy for us to meet up. Sometimes at the hospital and go get a coffee, or sometimes it would be out and about. So I was able to have that opportunity to meet somebody else who was living with syringomyelia. But I think for me, whilst it gave me that connection, again, fairly, I guess, unique in terms of story, is that he was living with more profound
Sure.
symptoms and signs of syringomyelia than I was. And actually, what I witnessed over our relationship was that he was he was deteriorating,
Yeah.
particularly
Yeah.
with his mobility, and I wasn't. And I really felt a sense of guilt that n nothing really was changing with me, but there was with him, and so I think we came to the agreement that actually that relationship would stop, because it went from having a real positive impact to then actually not being so positive.
Mm, mm.
So yeah, that was a really interesting time and really interesting sort of relationship to have with somebody of a similar age at the time who was living with syringomyelia.
And I suppose, when we talk about syringomyelia, there isn't, it's such a difficult condition to talk about because it does swing from one side of the pendulum to the other. Some people can live with syringomyelia quite happily, almost asymptomatic. And then unfortunately, there's the other side of the pendulum, whereby it really is debilitating. It's painful, serious mobility issues, and all other manner of complications because it's a neurological condition, right? And it
Mm.
has varying degrees in terms of where the syrinx sits in the spinal cord, in terms of what damage or what mayhem it's going to cause. I just want to move on a few years because I want to get to the most remarkable bit of your story. In fact, you know what that is. So talk us through that.
Yeah, so I guess I continued to live with, um, as I've set out really, and then at the age of 16, I decided, again, to be honest, a lot of it to do with what I didn't know then at the time was mental health and their
Sure, of
self-esteem
course.
and those sorts of things. But whatever it was at that time drove me to say, I want to get rid of this stoma. I don't want to live with it anymore. So I decided to have it removed. And to be fair, my consultant respected that decision at 16. And so I had that removed and sort of, I guess, learn to manage my bowels in a bit more of a normal way. And then on my 18th birthday, literally on the day of my birthday, I went for my final appointment at the Children's Hospital, and my consultant said, "I've got a birthday present for you." And I said, "What's that?" And he said, "You no longer have syringomyelia." And me and my mum were just sort of so taken back. We thought he was, making some sort of joke or something. But no, he explained that he'd had senior radiologists look over my scans, and there was no sign of any spinal syrinx. And actually, the tethering and everything had essentially resolved, which he said was the first ever case of spontaneous syrinx regression that he'd ever seen in his career. Um, and it just, I don't know, I just felt numb. I didn't know what to say or to do. And yeah, it was just this sense of relief and but still feeling guilty that that's not fair that I have this outcome but other people don't. And it was just such a significant and bizarre moment in my life that I'll never forget that day.
When you and I first talked, and you said this has happened to you, I was stunned, to be honest with you. I thought, well, I've never heard of this. I mean, I've lived with syringomyelia now well, I've probably lived with it all my life, to be fair. But I didn't realize I had it until things deteriorated. What would that be now? How old's my daughter? About maybe sort of 14, 15 years ago. And I like to think I'm reasonably well read on the subject. Not boorishly so, but enough to sort of have a decent conversation with the senior medical professionals and experts within the Anne Conroy Trust. And I've never ever heard of a syrinx disappearing. And when you told me, I just went, no, that can't be right. That doesn't happen. That doesn't happen. You can deflate them, you can drain them, they don't go. I don't,
Yeah,
I just, and I came away from our first phone call and I was like, my reaction was, well, if it's bloody well true, why isn't mine gone?
yeah, yeah.
Why is mine still hanging around? How did yours just disappear? I mean, I had so many questions, and I really the word I described was miraculous. I've just heard this miraculous story of this chap called Brad, whose syrinx disappeared, and syringomyelia was gone. So you get this diagnosis, and I'm going to assume then that from then onwards, happy days, green fields. You were laughing and skipping around like a lamb, and there were no other complications or issues.
Well, I think that I think that's the thing is
Yeah.
it because it's so rare, it's a rare condition, and then to have this outcome is, there's lots of debates in terms of, was the tethering, clinically significant? Could have these other problems just been, caused by other things? There was so much to sort of try and unpick from it. And I think for me, actually, one of the hardest things has been is going from that last appointment of and being told that to then going to university and not having very good transition care from pediatrics to adult care is going to that first appointment in university and the neurologist essentially saying, well, there's not much point me seeing you and being discharged. My support network that I'd had for 16 years just completely pulled from under my feet. And what it meant then is then when I went to the GP, for example, if my headaches, because I still struggle with that, or constipation, is that having to explain what syringomyelia is, and then explain actually I don't know to say whether I don't have it anymore or I'm in some sort of remission. I don't know how to describe it. Is Was so difficult because it felt like I had to start from scratch all over again at every GP appointment I had.
And you must
Um,
have had some pushback from the medical profession, understandably, to perhaps maybe question if you had syringomyelia in the first place.
oh, absolutely, Jazz, and honestly, it's something that I'm so um, I guess, sensitive around, because I ended up in my 20s going back because my headaches were getting worse, and I thought, I'm not quite sure here. Like, the neurologist did tell me that he can't promise it would never come back. So I went and had an MRI scan in my 20s, and um, the primary care service actually were really frustrated with me because they said you don't have syringomyelia, and they made me feel that I'd made it up. And so, I guess for my own sanity, I've saved all of my old clinical letters that talk about the Syrinx and where it is and all of those sorts of things. And I keep paper copies of them, and I've taken photographs of them because I feel so, I guess, a bit vulnerable that I'm not being believed, or that, I'm somebody who's just making
Awful.
something up.
No, absolutely. I mean, you walk, it would make even a sane person walk around with a severe imposter complex, and it's doubly difficult in this circumstance because not only is syringomyelia incredibly rare, you have more chance probably of winning the lottery than getting it. For it to suddenly just disappear, vanish without a trace is, well, it's beyond rare. I mean, it's bordering, I think, on miraculous. I mean, I did speak to a very eminent neurosurgeon at the last Anne Conroy trustees meeting, and I said, actually, look, come on. Is this a thing? Do they just, can they just vanish? They went, yeah, they can. It's extremely rare, but yeah, rare. I'm not sure if he'd come up against an instance other than perhaps read about them. So for you, it's a doubly isolating because the symptoms haven't completely gone away, right?
No.
There's a residue of syringomyelia, if you want to describe it as that.
Oh, I think that's beautifully put, Jazz. It is. It does. Although I don't, like I said, it's hard to find the right language. But I guess because I don't have it anymore, I don't feel like syringomyelia has left me. The impact that it had for so many years, and what it's, whether or not you want to debate, whether there was clinically significant, the syrinx. I live with these problems, and are still dealing with the remnants, like you say, of syringomyelia, but it's that I don't have that attachment to it, so it's hard to communicate with the medical community and try and make them understand that actually there are reasons for these things, that I'm experiencing, and that I think is probably going to be one of the hardest things from syringomyelia that I'm going to have to manage for probably the rest of my life, you know.
No, absolutely. Look, Brad, it's a really remarkable story. I'm conscious of time. You've been very generous with your time. We've only got about sort of 10 minutes left. So I just want to, what I'd love to invite you to the Anne Conroy Trust conference that's happening later on this year, because I think actually to just tell your story is remarkable. And I think, sharing your story on this podcast, uh, I think gives a completely different inflection on the case studies and the people that we've spoken to beforehand. And I think, for children who are diagnosed with syringomyelia at a really young age, perhaps your story is a story of hope, that actually, whilst there is a residue, and there may well always be in that person's life, that actually, not having the syrinx effectively means it's not going to get worse. And
Yeah.
I think as in the case of your childhood friend, where it did become more and more debilitating, and unfortunately, I can sort of testify to that personally. But I'm much older, so it doesn't matter. It is a story of hope for young children out there who and for parents in particular who might be looking for a kind of a I don't know. I don't know if an olive branch is the right term of phrase, but I think you know where I'm going. What do you do,
Yeah.
Brad? What do you do for what's your profession? What's hobbies? Just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I mean, it's probably a bit cliche, isn't it? But I trained as a children's nurse in
Wow.
university, sort of inspired, I guess, by the memories I had of nurses caring for me. And then I went on and did some further training in more of a medical role. And then I've done a bit in academia, teaching, bit of health policy, trying to make things better for communities and stuff. So, yeah, I guess my real passion in my career is trying to make health access better. It's trying to
Mm.
make experiences in care better. And I think I'm probably my takeaway from all of this experience is I am a huge advocate for children and young people being more involved in their care decisions,
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
actually sure that that those transition arrangements that I didn't have, that they are there, because I do feel that mental health input and support for syringomyelia or indeed any sort of rare condition is vital for children and young people's health and well-being as they get older. So yeah.
And I think what your story kind of highlights that if we just look back at that early part of our conversation when you were at school between those ages of 9 and 16, you were pretty resilient, right? I mean, you learned to keep your own counsel. You were very much aware of your own condition, how it affected you, how you managed it yourself because you had to. And I think sometimes there's a tendency, and I say this as a parent, to wrap our children up in cotton wool and make all the decisions for them.
Mm,
And I think it's pretty insulting to their intelligence because I remember being a child. I remember being 9. I remember 9 to 16 really well. I was pretty self-aware and able to make decisions and able to cope with issues. I had a wheelchair-bound mum, and that added a certain level of difference to my other friends out there, and things we could and couldn't do as a family. So I think you're absolutely right. Yeah, I mean, if the child is resilient and wants to be involved and is able to be part of that decision making process, then great. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah.
And you're right. In terms of that transition from child to adult, there does seem to be that sort of cut off and not absolute follow through. So I think the fact that you're championing that is amazing. Is absolutely amazing. I hope you do come and join us.
Oh yeah, absolutely, Jez. Yeah, I would love to. Yeah, it'd be an absolute pleasure, and it'd be nice to, I guess, be in a setting where syringomyelia is a little bit more normalized, and
Yeah,
be around people who understand it. And if I can share my story, if that is anything to anyone, then yeah, of course, we would love to be involved.
that's a remarkable story, and I'm sure some of our um, neuroscientists, neurosurgeons, doctors, medical experts, advocates, trustees. We'd love to sort of hear the story. Thank you again for joining us on the podcast. Amazing. Um, Anything nice planned for the rest of the week apart from shielding from the sun? Mind you, you're in Wales, so it'll probably be raining tomorrow. You know.
Yeah, it probably will be. I mean, luckily, I've got the beach down the road, so yeah, if it's nice but not too hot, I'd probably take a stroll down the beach, to be honest.
Those green fields of the valleys. I had one of my best holidays in Wales with the family. It was just peachy weather. It was hot sunshine. It was absolutely gorgeous. I loved it. Brad, I wish you well. Hopefully, we'll see you in September. And
Yeah,
thanks for sharing your story.
great. Thanks so much, Jazz.
Well, what an absolute top guy. Honestly, what an amazing story. I could have spoken to him for hours, and I'm sure there's an awful lot we didn't cover. Maybe, do you know what? I'll invite Brad back for a second bite of the cherry just to see how he's getting on, because I think the work that he does with children is just so important, so invaluable, and so appreciated. And I hope I managed to get that across on the podcast. Right, okay, I mentioned the autumn meeting for the Anne Conroy Trust, which is happening later on this year. Let me give you the dates and times and where. If you want to come along and register, there is a process, so just hold off on your pen and paper just for a second. So the date is Saturday the 26th of September. That's Saturday the 26th of September 2026, just in case you happen to be listening to this next year. And the address is Kettering Park Hotel and Spa, and that's in Kettering Parkway, Kettering, and the postcode is NN156XT. But don't worry, you didn't need your pen and paper, because if you go to the Anne Conroy Trust website, that's at www.anneconroytrust.org/events, you will find all the information about the autumn meeting there. And I do encourage you to come along and meet with others who are living with very similar conditions, or parents, or friends, or other family members. And certainly if you're a support worker as well, all are welcome. Now, I'm going to be honest and say that, it's not an infinite amount of space. So if you really want to come along and have a chat and be part of this meeting, get in quick. Go to the website now and register. The registration fee it's a bargain, for goodness sake. Charity members, £10 per person, and you can bring one guest. A charity member can bring one guest, which is also £10. If you're not a member, don't worry, but it's still, I think, an excellent entry price of £20 per person. And of course, the money goes to the Anne Conroy Trust, which funds the research around syringomyelia and Kyrie malformation. I mean, it's an absolute worthwhile day out. A buffet lunch and refreshments throughout the day are included within the registration fee. And as I say, places will be allocated on a first come, first served basis, with priority given to charity members. Additional guests may be able to attend, subject to availability. So that date again for your diary, you can have your pen and paper ready now. It's Saturday the 26th of September 2026 at the Kettering Park Hotel and Spa. There you go. I hope to see you there. There's more exciting, is that the right word, exciting? I'm not sure. More engaging stories coming in season 2. So do stay tuned, spread the word. We need to get the word out there. And I'll see you on the next podcast. Take care.